Welcome to the Women in Wellness podcast. This is your place to get the latest up-to-date health and wellness information specifically for women, while providing you practical tools you can implement today. I'm Dr. Caitlin Zazowski, and I wanted to personally thank you for spending part of your day with me. Hello, Women and Wellness. I am actually very intrigued with this conversation that I'm going to have today with Dr. Sandy Glockman. And before I tell you what topic it is, you want to know exactly what she does, because it's actually remarkable. What ends up happening is Dr. Sandy works with parents, and more times than not doesn't never or ever need to meet the child in order to address or improve the child's learning, behavior, mood, and any challenges they might be facing. How amazing is that she's able to help out these families by working with the parents? So our topic today is going to be, it's a good one. Talking ourselves from pandemic's fight, flight, freeze, and into flow. So welcome, Dr. Sandy. I love this topic. I think it is so important. And the best part is you're going to talk about not only how this pandemic is affecting us personally as women, but how that's going to trickle down and affect the next generation. So welcome. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and thank you for inviting me.
So where do you want to start with this pandemic affecting us personally at either a fight, flight, or freeze mentality or period in time?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying that we all are going through the same kind of quite shocking situation at the moment. And it is understandable that it's going to affect us in terms of the level of stress that we're going to be experiencing. And, I think that what happens, Caitlin, is that we kind of get used to thinking, well, this is the situation, it is what it is, and I am stressed, I'm very stressed, but I'll get through it. And at the end, hopefully when things come right, I can just let go of the stress. But it's not like that at all, because what happens is this has been going on now for, as we know, over a year, and we don't know how long it's still going to be going on. And what's happening is that every single hour of every single day, while we're dealing with the challenges of this pandemic, we are actually placing our bodies under enormous stress pressure. Mm-hmm. So what that actually means in terms of science is that every time we have a stressful thought, or we have a worst case scenario going on in our head, or we are anxious about something and worried about our health, our family's health, we are secreting cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Under normal circumstances, cortisol is a most fantastic hormone. It allows us to get through stress. Mm-hmm. But these are not normal circumstances. And so we are collecting more and more and more levels of cortisol every single day. And what that does is it upsets our biochemistry and our neurochemistry. So what we are essentially doing is we're changing our bodies and our brains, because we are putting our bodies and brains under an enormous amount of stress, literally a huge amount of stress hormones pumping through our bodies and through our brains, and changing everything about who we are, how we think, how we behave, pretty much our health level for sure. You might even be surprised to know that it even changes our gene structure, our genetic structure. Mm-hmm. So we could be, because we are so stressed and we're collecting these higher and higher levels of cortisol, the chronic stress causes inflammation in the body and in the brain. Inflamed bodies and brains don't work well. So we could be creating some kind of dis-ease or disorder or disease for ourselves. coming down the line in maybe already happening, or in the next few months or in the next few years. We start that process now. And then we also are switching on the bad genes instead of being able to switch on the good genes. Mm-hmm. So this issue of stress is much deeper one than most of us understand, unless we've been trained in it. And I think it's highly dangerous for us to just take it for granted that it's a time that we'll be stressed, but it will go away. Because by the time life comes back to some sort of normal or different way of being, we have actually damaged our brains and our bodies. Mm-hmm. And as you said in your opening, Caitlin, that's not good for us. But, you know, my work is about the next generation. I say that my quest is to save the next generation from being overdiagnosed, over-medicated, misdiagnosed, getting all kinds of diagnostic labels attached to them. And essentially, at the end of the day, and I say this with all the love in the world because I'm a parent and a grandparent, essentially it comes down to how stressed is the mother or the grandmother or the auntie in this child's environment, because the level of stress in these people will be the level of stress in the child.
Whoa, can you say that one more time, just so that everybody really lets that sink in, that their own stress is going to affect their child's stress? Can you go at that one more time? Because that is so important.
Yes, I would love to. I'm glad you asked that, because it's actually the central part of my work, and it's why my work is so absolutely effective. It's remarkable. It's transformative. It's because I take a look at what's going on in the parent. What's the level of stress in the parent? What's the parent thinking, believing? How's the parent behaving under stress? You know, the fact of the matter is, Caitlin, we are energetic vibrations. That's all we consist of. Mm-hmm. So whatever we are thinking or feeling comes from us in an energetic vibration and is picked up by the child. So it's known as interpersonal neurobiology. Simply put, it means I'm changing my child's brain every moment that I'm with the child, depending on what's going on in my brain. And so if I have a stressed brain, my child will have a stressed brain.
Wow. Interpersonal neurobiology. I love it. I love that you're bringing the science into it, because the science is my love language. Not everybody loves that kind of language or talk, but it really makes sense when we get down to it as to exactly how it's affecting us, and how it'll not only go from affecting us, but moving on to that next generation. So what you're ultimately saying is, if let's say the mom is under a ton of stress with work and all of the restrictions and homeschooling their kid, all of that stress that that mom is feeling and under, the kids are going to sense that, pick that up. And how is that stress going to come out? Or how are we going to know that our child is stressed? Because from my education, children express stress very differently than adults. So how might we determine whether or not our child is in a stressed out situation?
So if I may, Caitlin, I'm going to go a little back and then come back to your question.
Perfect.
So remember I mentioned a little moment ago that when we are pumping an overload of stress hormones into our bodies and our brains and brains become inflamed. And an inflamed brain means then that the neurotransmitters, those wonderful things that get us to be the wondrous beings we can be, or the opposite, those things are thrown off balance. And the result is that this inflamed brain and the neurotransmitters, which are now no longer in healthy balance, changes our behavior. And we are left with only 3 kinds of behavior, which is what we call stress survival behavior. And those 3 kinds of behavior are famously known as fight, flight, or freeze. So you get a mom who, under stress, will be the kind of person who resorts to fight mode. So she's easily frustrated and annoyed and angry and irritated, and gets to the point where she yells and then maybe even threatening consequences and, you know, all that kind of things we do when we're under stress and we're in fight mode. Then you get those kinds of moms who are not fighters, they are flighters. So in other words, they flee inwards. They get quiet. They are down. They're moody. They're sad. They're worried. They're anxious. And then you get those moms who are in freeze mode. They're totally overwhelmed. They don't know what to do in this situation. And they feel so helpless and stuck. So if a parent is in fight, flight, or freeze, and as we said, since we are energetically vibrating beings, we are going to send that energy out. It makes a lot of sense, because that somebody in our space will pick it up, whether it's our children or our spouse or our best friend or our mom or our sister. Somebody's going to pick up that dysfunctional stress energy from us. And of course, it's going to affect their brains as well. My concern, of course, is what is it doing to the next generation's brains? So to answer your question about how will we tell if the child is stressed, well, it's the same kind of thing. We get children who are fighters, those who are flighters, those who are in freeze. It doesn't mean to say just that if mom is a fight stress person, then the kid will be fight stressed. No, some kids are very sensitive in nature and they go into withdrawal. They get sad, they get down, they're unmotivated. And then, of course, if they're unmotivated and they don't want to learn, then mom gets mad.
Right.
And now we have a conversation with the mother who's in fight mode because she's stressed, and the child who's in flight mode because he or she is stressed. And what are we doing? We're secreting more cortisol. And the brain's getting more and more inflamed. And the situation is going absolutely nowhere good.
I love that you keep bringing up inflammation, because inflammation is, I believe, the root of all problems when it comes to how our body might be misfunctioning or not firing properly, whether it's hormone imbalances, whether it's digestive issues, whether it's autoimmune. There's always a root of inflammation. So thank you so much for bringing that up, especially when it comes to inflammation causing mood, personality, behavior differences and traits. That's something that I've never, because that's not my field of expertise, thought of, and I've never had the pleasure of having that conversation with somebody who's bringing that back to inflammation. So what would, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but you've given me such an incredible opening here, and I want to grab it. And
run with it.
One of the very important things, the parts of my work that I teach parents is, well, I teach them to notice this and then to fix it. In other words, am I an inflammatory parent? So I speak about inflammatory parenting. So what happens when we are under stress and we get into the different kind of fight, flight, or freeze, whichever one we tend to gravitate towards, we will then react to our children in a whole dysfunctional kind of way. We either withdraw from them or we yell at them. And none of that is good for the child. And so that would be inflammatory parenting. So when we are stressed, we become inflammatory parents because our language is different. We communicate with them differently. The look on our face is different. The tone of our voice is different. Our energy, as I said, is different. And inflammatory parenting actually triggers and worsens learning behavior and mood challenges.
So how do we get out of inflammatory parenting?
Well, first step, let's say, is perhaps the audience who is listening can do this now, and that is to just sit for a moment. I'm sure you can answer the question very quickly, is just to reflect, when I'm in stress mode, am I someone who goes to fight, or am I someone who goes to flight, or am I in freeze mode? So
can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
Can people be multiple? Can they be fight, flight, or freeze at different times depending?
Great questions. Yes, absolutely they can. But sometimes they're like in fight with the kids, but in flight with the spouse. So it depends on who you're with.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can have multiple responses, stress responses, based on the individual that we're interacting with, or yes, potentially or the environment.
Environment, yes, absolutely. So we can have all three. I should have mentioned that earlier. We can be all three.
That makes sense, especially, professional environment versus home environment versus, that would make complete sense. Because I'm sitting here going, depending on who I'm with, I will do different things.
Yes.
So, okay, perfect.
So that's a good one. So then maybe the audience that's listening can say, okay, how am I with my spouse? Is that the same as me under stress with my children? And if there's any other relationships you want to explore, but those may be the most primary ones. Or, me at work with my boss, most likely I'm going to go into flight and not fight mode.
Typically, so right.
Being able to recognize at any moment in time, where am I in a stress response survival mode? You've got to pick it up, because if you don't notice it and you aren't aware of it, awareness is the first step of change. So we need to have that awareness. And then to get to your question is, how do we change that? So we need some tools to be able to make that change. And so I'm going to go to the science again.
Awesome.
For me, my work is so rooted in science that I can't talk without going back to the science for a moment. So what happens when we are in stress mode is that we are also using a brainwave, which is called beta, B-E-T-A. I don't know if we say beta here or beta, but from me in South Africa, we used to say beta, the beta wave. Here, I think we call it the beta wave. And the beta brainwave is a brainwave that's very heavy, and it's dense, and it causes us to feel negative emotions. So when we are in stress mode and we have a beta wave in our brain that is sparking, we are going to feel frustration, annoyance, lack, irritation, guilt, shame. The list is long. So we want to get out of that space, and we need a vehicle to take us away from that brainwave, away from that stress mode, to a different brainwave and a different mode, which is a thriving mode, not a surviving mode. And that means really we need to move into a brainwave, which we call alpha, A-L-P-H-A, the alpha brainwave. So the alpha brainwave is just wonderful, because it's a place where our whole chemistry shifts into this feeling of calm and joy and serenity and a sense of wholeness and a sense of divine order of things and a sense of the positive nature and opportunities of an event. It's just a very different place. We don't see negative worst case scenarios. We see opportunities. We feel enormous gratitude for life. It's a beautiful place to be. However, we can't go there by just thinking, I'm going to get out of beta now and go into alpha.
That'd be too simple.
It would be. I wish we could. We do need the vehicle. So I often use the analogy of, if let's think, if you want a particular radio station, because it's got beautiful classical music, you love classical music, particularly piano like me, then you're going to know that you need to go to a frequency where you're going to find that radio station. But if you're a person who loves heavy rock, then you have to change the radio station to the different frequency. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're just changing our brain waves from the beta frequency to the alpha frequency. But as you said, it's not that simple.
It's not as easy as just turning a knob.
No, it's not. But I want to tell you something. It's much easier than it sounds from what I've just described. It really is much easier. And we've, after many years of study and research, science has shown that there really is only one way to shift out of that heavy stress survival mode into this really beautiful light calm mode, and that is through meditation.
Well, and you actually have a very interesting way to look at it, because you want to talk about, and I would love to hear this, the difference between meditation versus medication.
Yes. Now you really get me on my favorite topic. Well, my favorite unhappy topic. So again, remember, my focus is about saving the next generation. And I do feel very strongly that currently we are overdiagnosing, over-medicating these children, misdiagnosing them, giving them diagnostic labels which hang around their necks for the rest of their lives and make them feel like they're not good enough. They're just not enough. So it's a very bad journey that we go on with this. And in many cases, it includes medication. These diagnostic labels, then the doctor pulls out his script pad and writes a script for a medication, sometimes 2 or 3 medications, because these doctors hand out these diagnostic labels like they candy, you know, ODD, OCD, ADD. And then what happens is all we are doing is trying to change the child's chemistry from the outside in by swallowing something. The truth of the matter is, however, that child or the mother, let's talk about ourselves first, because it starts with us. So if we're not feeling good about ourselves, we're feeling down, we're feeling overweight, our appetite's gone out the window, or we're eating too much, you know, the whole long list of hormonal issues us wonderful women have to deal with. If we're not feeling great, then and if we go to the traditional approach, and believe me, I'm not knocking medicine. I'm just saying that when it comes to traditional versus the more modern approach to healing ourselves, we need to look at both sides. And of course, I lean more towards the more modern approach, the functional medicine approach towards healing.
It's okay. My listeners are used to me saying there's a time and a place for medications, but you got to figure out what's actually causing the problem if you ever want to resolve it. Medication is just a Band-Aid. It's never going to completely resolve the actual problem. So you're definitely not saying anything that I haven't been preaching for years and that they haven't heard from other.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. You can't say that enough times, Caitlin, I'm sure.
I know.
So the truth is, as you said, we are just putting a Band-Aid on, but the underlying root cause is there. And that underlying root cause very often is some unfinished business in our childhood that we brought through with us into our lives, into our parenting, into our sense of personal identity. And it's causing inner pain, and inner pain causes inner stress. And then we go right back to the whole story of stress, building stress, fight, flight, freeze. So we do need to deal with the underlying root cause. However, I have a degree in clinical psychology, but I'm not practicing therapy or psychology in that kind of way at all, because I've moved away from too much talk, more to show me how to shift away from my stuck place, which is always, as I said, a combination of beta, brainwave, and stress hormones. Not a good combination. So I'm moving more towards, well, tell me your story, because your story is important. It's important to you. It's important for me to know it. And then let's look at how you can move away from being stuck from the negative energy of the story out of beta and into alpha. And that's what meditation does. it literally takes us away from the heaviness of our past, from the story we've been holding on to, from the inner pain that we've been sitting with, and it puts us in a very different place.
Absolutely. And
when it comes to children, I mean, Caitlin, think about it. These amazing, wondrous children, they are, and you know, I want to be careful here, because there are probably thousands of parents listening and saying, well, my child's on medication. And I'm saying to you, that's fine, as long as it's not for the rest of his or her life, and we can reverse your child's symptoms so that the child does no longer need the medication. So the good news is we can rewire the brain, unwire and rewire the brain to be different. But you can't rewire your child's brain if you have not rewired your own brain first.
Wow.
And, you know,
do you mind diving into that? Because I think it's so important that we understand that how we think, how we act, how we respond, we're teaching our kids to do the exact same thing. And I know that parents, most people understand, you know, monkey see, monkey do, and they're cognizant of, you know, not using the cuss words around their kids as often. And because they hear it, they're going to repeat it. But when it comes to stress, I don't think parents understand that how we respond to stress and how we express stress, we're literally setting our kids up to deal with stress the exact same way that we deal with stress.
Absolutely. What we're doing is, and you know, I'll take it a step backwards, that when I work with the moms and the dads, I look at their program that they brought with them, the stress program that they brought with them from their moms and dads, the children's grandparents. So they brought a stress program with them, you know, the way I relate to the world kind of program with them. And then they became a parent, and now they're using that same stress program, which is usually heaviness and doubt and fear and worry and anxiety and a different form of communication, which is not great fun. And now they're using it on the third generation, and they are programming that generation to do exactly the same thing. And so if it kind of saddens me that we do have an amazing tool that is not a substance from the outside in, swallow it and you'll feel better. It's a way of healing ourselves from the inside, on the inside, from the inside out, so that the way in which we energetically come across or show up is absolutely different. And so the children pick it up. It's like, it's a magnet for them. And as we move into this beautiful, better place inside of us, so we are reshaping and rewiring their brains to move out of beta into alpha, into a beautiful place inside of themselves. It is the same thing as we spoke about earlier, interpersonal neurobiology.
So are you, and you can tell me if I'm thinking about this totally out of context, but meditation is extremely important for us to get us from the beta wavelength into the alpha wavelength, to change and raise our frequency, because ultimately frequencies attract other frequencies. And so by doing this, getting into meditation, having a practice of meditation, is that something that we also need to be teaching our children, is how to meditate? Or ultimately, are our children just going to change because we change?
You ask the best questions. Absolutely the best.
Well, you got me super interested. This is like, wow.
I could go on with you all day. So thank you for asking that. I would not advise, let me go back a second and say that with the best intentions in the world and all the love in the world, parents are running around to look for solutions to the children's issues, or even for solutions to their own concerns. But when it comes to the children, the message that I'm getting is, fix my child, please, Dr. Sandy, fix my child. And when you fix my child and I see my child as happy and learning easily and loving life and feeling good and confident and having emotional resilience, I'm going to feel fabulous. And it doesn't work that way. All of those things that we just wish for our children have to first be evident on our faces, in the way we speak, etc. So to answer your question about meditation, I would not teach a child meditation unless I am a parent that is meditating. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's like I'm trying to fix the child, but not myself. And now I want my child to get into a different wavelength and vibrate with a different energy, be more positive and feel great. But I haven't made that shift in myself yet. So when my child's come out of meditation from his room, 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, I'm still stuck in a bad place. And guess what I'll do?
You're going to bring that frequency right back down.
Absolutely. And it happens so quickly. It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that potentially incorporating a meditative practice within the family, even if it's 5 minutes a day, would make a massive shift or change within the family dynamics?
I do. I really do. I can say for myself, and I'm a professional meditator for many, many years now. It's taken a long journey and lots of practice, and it has changed my life, literally changed my life. People noticed in the beginning. They used to come and say, Dr. Sandy, there's something different about you. And then I knew I was getting it right. So yes, I know from my own family and my own experience that having a meditative practice is hugely, hugely beneficial on so many different levels.
So let's pretend that, there is a mom listening to this and she's like, oh my goodness, yes, I can see now that, my child is just expressing stress the way that I express stress. And it's this back and forth, a vicious cycle. How does she go about breaking that cycle, breaking that thought process, getting into that alpha wave for herself so that then, her child can, come home to a calmer household, come home to a household that is at functioning at a higher frequency, which as a result should help influence and change their both behavior, mood, learning, everything else that you've mentioned earlier.
Right. So I have a what I call a 10-session spirit, body, brain healing program. It's a combination of online coaching for parents together with live Zoom coaching. So every week, they will get access to a online site where they're given certain videos that they need to study and put into practice. And then they arrive the same week to a live session and we take it further and deeper. We get a lot of work done that way. And I have structured it in such a way, to answer your question, whereby I first do some healing work with the parents, with mom, with dad. We talk about what they're bringing from the previous generation, and then I teach them the meditation process. And only then do I begin to give them the tools, actual parenting tools for reversing the children's learning behavior and mood challenges. So if the parent only did the meditation, and got into it and just meditated, they already do tell me, that's in session 3 or 4, they say, I'm beginning to see a difference in my child, and they haven't even used the parenting tools yet. So the children are already picking up the different energy. And I love to tell the story about this 15-year-old who came into my consulting room, and she sat down and she said, by the way, I do see children sometimes when it's necessary. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I don't have to, because the parents have done the work and the children are fabulous. But she sat down, and she was a cutter, and it was a tough one. So she sat down, she said to me, Dr. Sandy, what have you done with my parents? So I said to her, what do you mean? And she said, well, they're weird. So I said, well, is it weird different? She said, they're just different and they're weird. I said, is it weird better or weird worse? Or different better or different worse? She said, no, it's much better, but it's just weird. And, at that moment, I knew that she had picked up a different energetic vibration. And really, Caitlin, within 6-8 weeks, there was no more cutting. She was moving forward and thriving in a beautiful way. But that would not have been possible if we were trying to stop the cutting from the outside in.
And only focusing on her.
And only focusing on
the parents. So is this something that grandparents, let's say they're not raising their grandchildren, but, they come, they babysit, they, spend time with them. Is this something that they should be focusing on too, is how they present themselves with the child, whether they're always anxious or worried, or, whether they're just present at that higher vibration of either joy or happiness? Would you recommend that grandparents do? And then another question, would you recommend that people who don't have kids yet but want kids to do this proactively to hopefully, prevent creating unwanted stressful responses in their kids?
Right. So grandparents have a huge impact on shaping the children's brains. And then remember, folks, that the grandparent is where the parent originally got the stress behavior from.
Yep.
So there's a great likelihood that, grandparents adore the kids, but I find that the grandparents are often very stressed and very anxious. They're concerned for everything should be okay for their wonderful grandchildren. And so I think it's really, really important for grandparents to realize that they are shaping the child's brain. They are wiring the brain, the grandchild's brain in a particular way. And it should not be the same way that they are wired. So they could go through meditation. They would love it. The grandparents I work with, they say it just made them so much calmer, so much more at peace with themselves and each other. So yes, absolutely. And then
I think people should be meditating regardless, because of the benefits that it imparts on you, yourself, your own life, and how you respond to the day-to-day stresses. Because wouldn't that be nice if, like, poof, no stress ever again? It's just not realistic. But having the tools to better cope with those stresses and those stressful situations is really what makes a huge difference. So I'm going to tell all of you women out there, start meditating, find a meditation practice that works for you. You will not regret it. I promise you. I've never had one person come back and say, what a waste of my time, unless they gave up and they didn't actually do it.
Right. And I teach meditation, to whoever wants to learn, so that they could always give me a call if they're interested. But I also talk about what you're saying, Caitlin, is I always say, you would never wake up in the morning and not brush your teeth.
Well, I hope not. I talk about mouth-body connection. You better not brush your teeth, women.
So it's the same thing. It's like, as you brush your teeth, you brush your hair, and you wash your face in the morning, you set aside time for 10 minutes of meditation. And I can also almost guarantee that when you start with 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it feels so wonderful. So it suddenly becomes 15, 20 minutes. But we got to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And there are different kinds of meditations. I think meditation has got a stereotype kind of attached to it, which is not always very positive. And there's also all kinds of myths about the best way to meditate and what the best form of meditation is. I can just help you discover which form of meditation feels right for you, put you on the road, and off you go.
Mm-hmm. What are some closing thoughts that you have before I ask you some fun questions to wrap this up?
Well, the closing thoughts are, I feel, is because I see every minute of the day, I'm working with wonderful parents who are so stressed and anxious, mm-hmm. and the children are hurting badly, really badly. We've got young kids talking about suicide. We've got some who have attempted suicide. Kids are confused. Lots of kids cannot cope with virtual learning. They really don't cope with Zoom at all. And there's a deeper reason for why they don't cope with Zoom, but I can't go into that right now. And so I feel that if there's one thing we could all do at this moment in time for ourselves, if we don't have children, but for ourselves and the next generation, if we do, then that is to understand that I have a choice not to allow the stress to become toxic within me so that it changes who I am and how my body and my brain work.
Wow. That was very powerful, because that's not only going to change our life, that is going to shape and change the futures of generations to come.
Absolutely.
Not just your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids. Because if you can break that stress response with you, wow.
It starts with us. It really does.
All righty. So, fun few questions. What is your favorite beverage?
Oh, my favorite beverage is, I don't know if everybody knows this, but because I've got a South African background, so it's called rooibos tea.
Oh, yep. I like rooibos tea. What, do you have like a specific brand you like?
I get it from South Africa. So if you have a store near you that sells South African products, they've got the real rooibos, but you can get it online, and it's really healthy. It's my favorite drink.
It's a very flavorful tea. I enjoy it very much so. What is your favorite meal?
Steak.
Steak. How do you like it cooked?
Rare blue. Put it on, sear it, take it off.
Got it. You just want to color on the outside.
That's all. And I know that it's not the best, probably not the best, but with a good piece of steak, from a really good butcher, I love it.
Yep. When the quality is there, grass-fed, grass-finished, hormone-free, that's really what makes the difference. So yes. What is your favorite pick-me-up music that, gets you into a good mood after, maybe a challenging session or stuck in traffic?
Well, you talk about pick-me-up music, and there's probably different kinds of ways of understanding that, because interestingly enough, for me, pick-me-up music is really music that you hear in meditations. Mm-hmm. That very gentle, soft background music. And I'm just not a fan of very loud, bouncy type of music. I guess I'm become addicted to alpha. So you do actually get, alpha music. You can Google alpha sound, and then it's free on internet, and there's this beautiful sound that comes up, and I just leave it in the background. Love it.
When you said piano music, classical piano, that's what I put on when I am working, writing, researching. Yes. It's very calming, and it allows me, for some reason, to understand things better. So that's my go-to for that type of thing.
We're the same with that one too.
Yeah. What is on your bedside night table?
I've got the most boring bedside night table in the world, because I've got this beautiful lamp and pretty much nothing else. I try not to read at night when I go to bed, because I find then my mind is too alert. So I have nothing there.
Oh, hey.
It might be an essential oil sitting there.
If you have a lavender.
Yes.
That's a beautiful smell.
Yeah.
All right. Where can my listeners find you?
So go to the website, www.dr for Dr. Sandy, Sandy, Gluckman, GLUCKMAN.com. DrSandyGluckman.com.
Perfect. And women, I will put that in the show notes as always, so that if this resonates with you and you're like, oh my goodness, finally something that makes sense, reach out. I encourage you to dive deeper and take a step inward and really think about how do you respond to stress, because that is a big problem, or a big thing that we are all being exposed to, especially this past year. So thank you so much for being with me, Dr. Sandy Glockman. I appreciate your time, your expertise, and I might have to have you come back on and talk about Zoom. This is, you're piquing my interest.
I would really like to, if your audience is interested, I'd love to, because there's something very bad going on with Zoom. I mean, not Zoom, but screen learning. Yeah. That some children simply cannot handle, and then it causes, guess what, a lot of fights and stress and a conflict in the family. And so I think some education about that might be useful.
Wonderful. All right, ladies, thanks for listening, and I will see you next time on Women in Wellness with Dr. Caitlin. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Women in Wellness as much as I did. If you did, please leave a review and a rating so that others can also benefit from the information being shared. Make sure to subscribe as new content is released on Women in Wellness Wednesdays. And if you want to connect with us, go online to womeninwellness.com. That's women, the letter N, wellness.com. I look forward to seeing you next time.